Lana's ready to start,
Yeah.
but if you want to move around.
Yeah, Lana.
Why do you think it's important to have a good education at school?
Why is it important to have a good education at school? Well, because it's fundamental that we have the skills and the knowledge to equip us to fulfil our ambitions, to realise our opportunities. When I was growing up, actually, one of the things I wanted to be, what Narani was saying, I wanted to be a vet when I was about 6 or 7 at that age. And when I started doing GCSE biology, I sort of realised maybe I don't like blood, maybe I don't like that sort of stuff. It's not really for me. I like cuddly animals. But what was important was, by learning about what being a vet actually entailed, it sort of closed that door off to me, but also gave me the opportunity to think about what else I might want to do. And I went on to do a law degree because it was something that I thought was really interesting. So it's about giving us all the tools to make our own decisions and decide our own destiny. I think that's really important, and that's why, you know, having great teachers and being able to learn as much as you can while you're here is fundamental in setting you up for whatever path you want to go to and go down in the future, and striving to go as far and make as much of an impact as you can.
How did your education help you become an MP?
So, for me, I was really lucky in that I had some teachers at school that sort of pushed me to broaden my horizons. And one of the key skills about being an MP is being a really good listener. So lots of politicians like to talk a lot, but actually listening is a really underrated skill. And we had like a debating society at school that taught you about the importance of actively listening to other people's contributions and trying to understand where they're coming from. And that set me up very well, because last year, I don't know if you remember the general election, I went knocking on people's doors as a candidate 4 times a day, every day for 6 weeks. And it's really important that you can hear people's concerns and represent their voices in Parliament, because that's what being in politics is all about. It's about giving other people a voice and a platform. Yeah?
What is one piece of advice you would give to the pupils of Smithills?
Well, I think, per what I said earlier, it is really important to have, you know, aim for the stars and really have high ambitions. You know, I was the first of my family to ever go to university, let alone to become an MP. And I think that, you know, provided you work hard and you have that drive, you know, nothing is off the table as to what you can achieve. There will be barriers along the way, but especially at your age, you know, aiming high and thinking about what you can do to achieve your goals is really important. Whether that's academically, whether that's work, whether that's sports, whether that's performing on stage, whether that's practicing the fantastic speeches we heard today. You know, at your age, don't feel intimidated, don't feel cowed, don't worry about what others think about you. Be your own person. That's what I would say.
What does it take to be an MP?
You've got to be quite resilient as a Member of Parliament, you know, because we all know what social media can be like at times, but as an MP, I'm in the public domain, I'm a public figure, and it's quite right that people hold me to account and ask difficult questions, and that's entirely within the norms of politics and good discussion. I always say to people that, look, I don't always have the answer, I don't always get things right, and that's why listening is important. You have to be really resilient, because sometimes people will say things to you that you don't like, and sometimes people will criticise you in a way that you don't think is fair. And that is just the nature of being in public life sometimes. You know, whether you're a politician, whether you're a celebrity, whether you're a newsreader, whether you're a musician, whatever it be, there's always going to be someone who's going to say something about what you say, how you look, what you do, and you've got to have a bit of a hard skin with that. So resilience is really important, and between you and me, I don't spend anywhere near as much time, for instance, on social media as I used to before I became an MP, just because that helps with my mental health, because otherwise I would go a bit crazy, I think. But resilience is really important, you know, being strong and trying to find opportunities for you to build your resilience, doing things that you enjoy outside of politics is really important.
So, what do you consider to be the biggest challenge right now?
Well, we've got lots of issues about cost of living. I've talked about water bills going up still, but we've also had issues around cost of food, around the cost of energy. It was the biggest issue at the general election last year. And the government has been taking some policies forward about how can we bring bills down, but also how can we make sure that costs don't keep going up, how do we tackle inflation. And that's really important, especially for deprived communities, but also, you know, the cost of fuel, the cost of energy, the cost of mortgages impacts everyone, and that's a really important one. My first job was working at Bolton Hospital, where I worked in the medical records department, so I come from a bit of an NHS background with my parents, and one of the main issues was, and still is, about getting seen if you fall ill in a quick manner, whether that's going to accident and emergency at the hospital, or whether that's getting an appointment with your GP. And the government has been recruiting more doctors and nurses to help solve some of that, but also thinking a bit smarter about, you know, frankly, we're all living longer and with more complex health conditions. What can we do to encourage and support people to live active, healthy lifestyles in the community, and how can we focus on preventing people getting more ill as opposed to treating that illness when they present themselves to the NHS. So that's a really important one. That's before we get onto the international stage where there's so much going on, but maybe we'll come to that shortly. I don't know if anybody else has got a question on it, but really concerning around what's going on in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine of course, and also what's going on in Syria, which takes a lot of my time because I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Yeah.
What is your opinion on free school meals as 4 in 10 children live in poverty and cannot meet the current criteria?
Well, it's absolutely, so the provision is absolutely critical. You know, it's life-changing in the sense that we don't want, and I don't want, children to be going to school with empty bellies and not being able to focus on being able to study. And that makes a real impact on people's educational achievements, and has long-term detrimental impact. There has been some work that the government has done on free school meal provision in primary schools in particular, and that was a key manifesto pledge that the government was elected on. And there is more work to be done in this space, but it is really important, and I and lots of other MPs will push the government to be as ambitious as can be. That's despite the fact that we know it's very difficult around how much money we've got to spend, but this is a really important programme for the government. And it's right also that the government supports parents around making sure that children have meals outside of school as well. And that's why it's important that we bring those prices down and bring inflation down as much as we can, because everyone's really feeling the pinch.
What are your thoughts about the safety of children?
It worries me. Online worries me a great deal. Both around influencers and people who spread bad messages, but also spread hate and division. But also around people who want to use online platforms to prey on young people and children. There's been some work that's been done around online hate and division recently, and I was in Brussels meeting with the European Union about some of the work they're doing to tackle online platforms like Facebook, Twitter and others who are using algorithms to sow division, to sow hatred, and how in the European Union, but how in the UK as well, we can use the government to enforce powers to make sure that bots can't be used to sow division, and also the algorithms that sit underneath the messages aren't used to give those messages extra prominence. So we've got the Online Safety Act in the UK that can do some of this, in the EU we've got the Digital Services Act, but it's also really important that the owners of these platforms are held accountable and responsible for what is on their platforms. And if they try to wash their hands of it, myself and lots of other MPs will not deem that acceptable, because there needs to be a safe space.
As well as students, I feel teachers are very important, and I want to ask your opinion on increasing teacher salaries to avoid strikes.
Teachers are really important. All our public servants are, and you might remember during the pandemic it was quite right that we all stood on our stood on our doorsteps and banged our pots and pans to recognise all the key workers, whether they're teachers or teaching assistants, doctors and nurses, people who are working across government that will help the country going. You know, on teaching salaries, it's really important actually that teachers are paid a fair wage, because if we have an outflow of teachers, we then have a crisis in retention, and that actually is an issue for the bottom line in terms of how much it costs to train everyone. So it is really important. The government has introduced a new policy, which you may have heard about, which is to recruit 6,500 extra teachers as a first step, especially in key areas where there's shortages. And some of that is by putting VAT on private school fees to pay for that. But it is fundamentally important that not only have you got enough teachers, but the teachers you've got feel that they've got the government's backing, that they're motivated, that they're well paid, and they've got the resources to support them in encouraging you and helping you achieve your ambitions. So it's a great question, thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, I should have said what my job was before I became an MP, actually. So my job before I became an MP, I was responsible for chasing criminals in the banking system. So I went after money launderers and organised crime, people who were conducting bribery and corruption and tax evasion. But that's not something I knew I wanted to do when I even left university. I just eventually found my way into that. So, you know, for those of you who perhaps don't know yet, as I said earlier, you will find your way. Just have a think about what the subjects are that you enjoy the most. One final question for me. Does anyone here want to go into politics, bearing in mind what I've said? It's okay if you don't.
I do.
You do? Tell me why.
I'm interested in kind of like geopolitical development.
Okay.
Very interested in Pacific continent, Africa, because I reckon it has massive potential. Definitely the DRC, because it's rich in natural resources, and yet it's incredibly poor. And I think it's not right that they're being exploited by rich corporations, and yet they are working in conditions which later in life they could develop health issues.
Well, we've got an investigation in the Foreign Affairs Committee that's going to be looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the largest country in Africa. Maybe we should get you in front of us to come and tell us what you think, but you're right to say that the country has been exploited far too much, especially by Western countries historically, and that's impoverished people there, which is so sad to see, but it's got so much potential. So, yeah, good. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much.